Good morning, gentlemen. This is a test of new and different equipment that I'm trying. The picture might not be as clear or as good, but it is supposed to be easier for me to use, and this particular short video today is a test of that. My topic for the next few minutes is going to be the name of the book we're studying. This is an Old Testament survey course. So let me say a few words about that title, the title Old Testament. What makes the Old Testament old? The Old Testament is only old in light of the New Testament. So, of course, Jews don't refer to the Old Testament as the Old Testament. They refer to it as the Tanakh, the Torah, the Ne'evim, and the Ketuvim, the three components that make up the Hebrew Bible. The Torah is the 5 books of Moses. The Ne'evim are the prophets, the former prophets, which we would think of as the historical books, beginning with Joshua and ending with 2 Kings. And then the Ketuvim, the wisdom writings. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot the latter prophets. That would be the 12 and Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, of course. The Ketuvim are the wisdom writings, which would include the Psalms and the Proverbs and pretty much everything else, including Chronicles, which interestingly has a different status in the Hebrew Bible than it does in the Old Testament. We think of those as historical works. So that's a Jewish view of the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible, of course, was translated several centuries before Christ into the Greek language in what is called the Septuagint. The Septuagint included a number of books in it for which we have no Hebrew witness. Those books have been taken out of the Old Testament in our translations and relegated to a section in the Authorized Version, the King James, that we refer to as the Apocrypha. We call them that because apocryphal, of course, is something of uncertain origin, and the uncertainty is the lack of a Hebrew witness, the lack of a Hebrew text. These books were supposedly translated, yet we have no Hebrew document. They are not part of the Hebrew Bible. They were only part of the Greek Bible. So that Greek Bible became the very first Old Testament. It was the very first Bible of the Christian community before the canon of the New Testament was settled. Once the canon of the New Testament was settled, there came to be a book called the New Testament, and hence the Septuagint, the Greek Bible up to that point, came to be thought of as the Old Testament. You will hear me most of the time refer to the Hebrew Bible in what I'm discussing in this class, because, of course, the Old versus the New has gotten with it a connotation that is negative in scholarly circles and in ecumenical circles. Certainly nothing wrong with it from a Christian perspective. The Old Testament or Old Covenant is about the self-revelation of God to Israel, to the Jews, who of course are Christ's people, the people among whom he comes. And of course, word of him then spreads out, and the telling of his story in the Gospels and the telling of what the apostles do with that, and then the letters of St. Paul make up a New Testament. That designation of old versus new, in this sense, doesn't necessarily imply anything derogatory about the Hebrew Bible. It remains part of the Bible. There is only one Bible. We do not, certainly not in traditional Anglicanism as it is expressed in this province, sever the two testaments. The two testaments can't be severed any more than the right and left sides of any human individual's brain can be severed. They are a single work, a single revelation, a single self-disclosure of God. He simply did one part of that revelation, that unfolding of his self-disclosure, in what we now think of as old times, or what was thought of as old times when the New Testament came into being. In that sense, of course, it's all old to us now. We live thousands of years after, a couple thousand years after the incarnation, but there is that distinction that does need to be made. There's nothing derogatory about it when we say it, and it does not imply anything in the way of supersessionist theology in which the church replaces Israel, and Israel is thereby obliterated, and the covenant that God made with the Jewish people is blotted out. Those theories, those theologies are dangerous and not to be countenanced, I don't think, in our province and in our churches. That doesn't mean that the way Jews read the Hebrew Bible and the way Christians read the Hebrew Bible are going to be the same. We are going to read the Hebrew Bible in light of the incarnation and the record of the incarnation in what we call the New Testament, or the revelation of Jesus Christ to the world. Maybe someday we'll come up with a different name for it, but for now, that's the New Testament, and that makes the Hebrew Bible the Old Testament, and that is all that that means. So a few moments and a few minutes on that particular subject. That's a way to defend, if you will, the use of those two terms and tell people, if you get into some kind of discussion about that, that there's nothing derogatory about it at all. And it doesn't imply necessarily any particular theology about the relationship between the Jewish people today and the Christian church today, which is the subject matter of theologies of supersession of one kind or another. That's a whole different discussion. It's a discussion that we have to have in the church somewhere. I don't necessarily think that this short video, which is a test of equipment, is the place to do that. So that's Old Testament versus New Testament, Hebrew Bible versus Greek Bible, if you want to look at it that way. I'm not going to go into that further. And again, just a few words about this particular subject are in order now. That's all, and if this works, there'll be a lecture on the Joseph story in Genesis coming up shortly. Thank you, gentlemen.